Hi, Ginger.
Hi.
Thanks for sitting down with us.
Sure.
I was looking at your book, Natural Disaster, which is the best title.
Thank you.
You talk about your battle with depression, your chaotic childhood, your issues with anorexia, being in an emotionally abusive romantic relationship. You talk about all this stuff in your book. Do you feel like finally kind of putting that stuff out there was cathartic or empowering?
Yes, I think both things. I think that I didn't know what to expect. I didn't go into it I didn't want to write that book. I wanted to write a baby book about science. And that's what I went to the publisher with, because I've always been told I'm not a great writer. I've been really good at science and math. My entire education, teachers were like, yeah, I mean, it's all subjective, but they'd be like, maybe not your thing.
Yeah.
And then math and science were so easy, so that stuck really well with meteorology. And as I went through television, which was a different choice anyway, I didn't intend to be on TV even, I went to the publisher when I had this platform, and I was like, I've always wanted to communicate science with kids. Here's an idea for a character. They said, well, that's more like a teen or a tween book. Try to write that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not a writer. So, and then they said, well, just try it and come back to us. So I tried it. They said, that's great. We love this. And I started telling them of stories that the rest of the books would be based on about my life. And they said that they loved the storm chasing stories. Then all of a sudden I'm telling them, which happens when you get to know people, a story about not getting married when I was supposed to. And then they're like, no, that's a book. And then as I stood, and then they were like, we want you to write your book. And I'm like, I don't know. They said, try it. And so I tried a couple of chapters. They said, we love it. And it evolved into this thing where I went to write a 60-page book for babies, like a hard book, and then all of a sudden I'm writing a memoir about depression and suicide. I'm like, how did that happen? So I don't think I anticipated it, but absolutely needed it. And so that's something that was a great lesson in life too, is that this gave me another level of healing I didn't even know was possible.
Well, do you think it was healing in the sense that was it like a secret to you? Like maybe close friends kind of knew about your past, but there probably wasn't many coworkers or fans or people that see
even
you
family,
on TV.
even some family wouldn't have known all of these details. And I think even my dad hasn't read it, because I think enough people have told him that a couple of the stories, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to know that I hurt that bad.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to feel that, which is a whole nother issue. That's like for another book.
Yeah.
But that I think was hard, but it was great for me because I vacillated between, oh my gosh, the night before it was going to print, I looked at my husband, I said, I might lose my job. I didn't even think about that. Like, people may not want to renew my contract because they think, oh, she has depression. She's going to, fall off the face of the earth one day, because then she's going to have to go back to the hospital. And I had this like, and then he looked at me and he said, if you weren't scared right now, then this book wasn't going to make a difference and it wasn't going to touch people's lives. And then I felt a little more confident with that. But I went in to read my audiobook, very soon after it went to print. And after I read it, I'm like, did I share enough?
Yeah.
So I went between the two, because you can't say everything in the book. The book is actually a very light version of my life. It is the nicest of the bad stories. So It was a lot darker than that. My real life is a lot darker than that. But I thought that the book did what it was supposed to do by telling just enough.
When people start to open up about their dark past or their pain, I think they try to make it as digestible as possible.
Yes.
So I'm a stand-up comic. That's literally what I do. Is
Yep.
I take the worst moments in my life and I go, how do I make people that don't know me care?
Yeah.
And how do I make them understand? And then how do I make them laugh about it? Because in the beginning, when I first work on a bit, sometimes people go, "Aw," and you're like, "That is not what I want. I do not want your
supposed
pity."
to laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you go, "Aw," now I feel bad, and now I feel like like it's even almost worse than like true vulnerability. You're just like, "Oh, I just tripped in front of everybody." Rather than if I can make you laugh, we can both be like, oh, I felt that way too.
Yeah.
And oh, I see where you're coming from.
And that's what happens every time. Somebody identifies with it. And by somebody, I mean a lot of people. The stories that I started getting, the openness that people had after this book came out, I'm getting emails all the way from, you made me laugh and I really loved that, but I also, kind of feel that same way. Or I've had a boyfriend that did the same thing, all the way to, you saved my life, which is that's what I was not anticipating.
Yeah.
One of my favorite responses, really soon after, I'd say a couple of months after the book came out, this woman wrote and said, Ginger Zee saved my life. That was the subject of it. And then she went into how she has 3 children and she's never really attacked the depression that has taken her over, and she was about to kill herself. That book showed up by somebody, just giving it to her. She didn't know me. She'd never seen me on TV. She started reading it, and she checked herself into a hospital because she felt like if that is what changed my life, then that's what would change hers. And so she not only was alive for her children, and so grateful for that, but my story had inspired her to do that, which was not what I was expecting.
I think the more people that talk about it and the more people admit that they need help outside themselves, like you gave them permission to say, I don't have all the skills and tools to continue to live my life, which I think most people think when you turn 18, like, you did it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, school prepared you, your parents prepared you. But if we're being realistic, even in the best case scenarios, great parents that somehow knew what they were doing, and a school system that has everything that you thought, you still go in and people are like, I don't understand how to budget. Like,
No,
you know what I mean?
And
Like,
it's a weird time in life. It's a very weird time in life, just hormonally, emotionally, physically, everything. You have so much growth to do at that time, and I think maturity and age aren't cures to depression, but they certainly help.
well, it's also the fact that even when things are going well, there still needs to be a level of emotional intelligence that most people aren't being shown or are developing. And then when you add disappointment or rejection or death or chemical stuff that's inside of you, you now have to have an even stronger emotional intelligence that, again, nobody's kind of showing you. So,
and no one's teaching you, and that's one of the things that, the one thing when I do this and when I talk about it still, I want everything to have purpose at the end. The book had tools in it. I want to do more of that. I want someone to not just say, oh, I have that too, but now like, okay, what do you do about it? And that was what was so nice about the woman saying, and then I went and checked myself into an inpatient. It was like, oh, right, that is what I basically suggested by saying that's the thing that worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but here's some of the things that I did. Even this talk, I just want someone to come away with it with a solution that might help them. It may not be the answer, but maybe they can watch this or they can feel this and say, not only do I have those same things that she has, but she has hope and I can have hope too.
so what was it when you checked yourself in? What were some of the skills, tools, conversations that kind of helped you feel better and grow?
Going in the first place was really big. I think, that's the old adage of like admitting you have a problem. I had gone to therapy since I was 12. I mean, on and off, I had gone to plenty of therapists. So it's not that I didn't think other people or myself thought that I maybe needed some guidance when it came to emotional things. But I don't think that I ever got I don't think I was ready either to get what I needed from these people, but I don't think that I had the right therapist in most of those cases. I don't think that I had the right help necessarily for me at that time, And I think those are much like relationships. You need to try them out. You need to, and if that's not working, try something else. And I was very lazy when it came to my emotional health prior. And I also was very much in denial. I was a big person who would have something maybe sexually happen or something really disturbing in my life, and then wake up the next morning and tell myself over and over that didn't happen, and then that didn't happen. And people will say that you block trauma and your mind blocks trauma. I think I had that, but I also think that I purposefully blocked trauma, and I would truly forget.
Well, that is a coping skill. Like, nobody talks about the fact that, like, if you had a chaotic childhood, you learned how to cope, and whether that's numbing out, emotionally with drugs, partying, whatever you're eating, it doesn't really matter. You find a way to kind of numb out and separate yourself as a way to live in that chaotic, and whether it's abuse, whatever it is, situation. But then as you get older, you continue to use that skill, and it starts to be its own toxic way of handling things. So I think, yes, it got you through those things, but the fact that you weren't able to process them, you weren't able to grow, and then you start to continue to put yourself in those situations because A, you either don't realize it, or B, you're like, doesn't bother me.
Doesn't bother me because I did it before.
Yeah, you think that doesn't, like, it's like somebody being like, that didn't upset you? No. I used to tell people that all the time. No, it doesn't even bother me.
Yeah.
And you're just like, why am I crying because the bus? Like, I missed the bus. Like, something that shouldn't bother me is all of a sudden the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
But true honesty, and I wrote about this because this is the part that I think solved everything. Kind of. I mean, it's not solved. I still have depression. But honesty with myself is it. I was never honest with myself. I still have to regularly sit down, write it out. What do I really want in this situation? Because I'm so, programmed wrong that I have to work really hard now as a 38-year-old woman at saying, figure out what you really want, clearly communicate what that is to somebody. It should all come very quickly. I feel like it's a skill that we should all learn in second grade, how to emotionally handle most situations.
How to identify your emotions.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it was pretty upsetting to learn. I think I learned at like 28, 29 in therapy that I don't know how to identify my emotions. Like I would always just say I was angry. That was it. I was angry. Well, why are you angry? And then you pull it back and you're like, oh, I'm really hurt. Like I'm hurt or I'm upset or I feel lost. And all of a sudden you realize there's this full range of emotions. But I was just like, I want everyone to die. Like, that was like my base emotion. So I think even just the fact that you have to, and I'm very similar. I'm the same way where I'm like, how do I actually feel about what's happening? What do I really want the outcome to be?
How do I make a decision without worrying about the consequence was something else that I've learned through a lot of therapy. And what the hospital helped me do was very honest with myself by going to the hospital. In part, and I will say, it was also because I felt like I couldn't get out of the pattern that I was in. I was in the pattern of finding myself in emotionally, manipulatively abusive relationships. And that was a way for me to actually check out, have no phone. Once I got in there and they put me in a gown and they took all my clothes and they took everything away from me, I was like,
whoa, no, my stuff.
Wait a minute, I'm actually fine. Can I go back? And then, you know, I had a roommate in what I describe as like Orange is the New Black. It's very much like a prison, the hospital I went to. And you have everything there. You have schizophrenics, you have, you know, everything that a mental hospital has as a stereotype was there. I was in New York City, so it was like, you know, a high population, full, all the beds were full, and I think that was a really big moment of honesty with myself, that I'm with them. I am them. And so that was really good for me to feel, because it freaked me out into the realization that I needed to work really hard while I was here, because I better make use of this, because this is the scariest place I've ever been. I've never been to prison, and I imagine it's very much similar. And so I went into it, and then we had, I don't know how, but just the great coincidence and fortune of life is I met the therapist that finally got through to me. And I think that now I was, you know, the door was open finally and I was ready for it. But he's also very good. And he's the type of therapist that I need. He's cold, he's calculated, he's very like scientific, and he doesn't coddle at all. And I needed that. I had a lot of coddling therapists, and I don't know if it was just the type that it was like I was going for a type of therapist. I don't know what was happening, but he wanted to make me a better person, and he wanted to get to that base of what was wrong, and we really worked hard in those, you know, that week that I was there. And then I committed afterward to going to him twice a week. So it was actually committing to intense therapy afterward. And I think that's when things really started to make amends. But it's funny because I went about 5 years without seeing him after all of that. I wrote the book. They asked me, the publisher was like, it's going so well, it's wonderful, it has legs, people keep, you know, finding reason to buy it, and we really would like you to write another one. And they at first wanted me to write it for teenagers, because that's what the people had told them that they needed it. And now we've kind of decided that I write for adults, and it's more my stories are made for adults. But as I'm writing the second book, I'm realizing I'm not over this stuff. There's a lot I still haven't uncovered. And just like exercise, I want to go back to therapy, because I want to be mindful about myself. I want to keep improving. I don't know how I had even taken that break and been okay, but I don't want to find myself in those moments where I don't have the help to go to. So I started back up with Dr. Wilson, and I've been going for the last year or so.
And do you go once a week?
Once a week, yeah.
Like the way I kind of use therapy, and I travel a lot, is that I try to do it once a week, and then when I'm traveling, I kind of give myself like these 2 week, 3 week breaks, and then I'm kind of like, okay, let me just recenter. And like there's some sessions where I'm like, I didn't really need that, but I'm glad I did it. And there's some weeks where I'm like, I think I needed to go twice that week. Like I definitely needed extra support.
It's just like exercise. If you think about it that way, there are weeks where you're going to need more. You're going to need to get more energy out. You're going to need to have someone coaching you to strengthen your emotional well-being versus your physical well-being, you know, and that's, I think you need that coach. You need that person.
You also have different challenges. So like relationships are a trigger for me. So when I'm not in a relationship, I feel awesome. I'm pretty great by myself. I'm like almost the opposite of most people. Like I feel
not my experience.
I feel the best when I'm alone. I think I'm great. Like whatever this like self-love movement is, I was like, it's inside me. I'm pretty great. And then I get in a relationship and it triggers everything, and I fall completely apart. And things that I thought I was over, I wasn't really over. They weren't being utilized. So whatever that connection you have when you're dating somebody, it wasn't being sparked. Therefore, I wasn't having issues with it. that's when I start to need kind of extra help, because I start self-sabotaging and throwing people away because I'm just like, I'm so much better alone and they don't deserve me and blah, blah, blah. A good example is right before this job is when you went to the hospital. Did you know that you were going to get this job and you felt like, I don't want to ruin this, so I need to start helping myself?
This job, in ways, saved my life that way, because my career is something that I've been able to not be questioning. That's something that I was able to make a decision at the beginning once I knew I wanted to be in television after studying meteorology. Once I had made that goal, that's been something that's pretty easy. And I've had a really great ride. And so I got the job. I had the offer. I was in a really bad place emotionally, personally, and in my relationship. And the transition that was happening in me, I could feel it. But I was also, within not too long before I had gotten the job, had been in a cop car getting away from a manipulative boyfriend. And that's where I was in an emotionally abusive situation, and I'm thinking, I can't be that and go get a job on a national platform. Not to say that we're super famous, but like, you can't do that. You can't have success like that and then be a total mess in your personal life.
It's going to catch up with you.
It will. We forgive people. We forgive people for having breakdowns, like Britney Spears. You think about someone like that who's done such a great job, I think, at kind of having the comeback, right? So it's not that it can't happen, but I didn't want to even get there, because I was feeling like shaving my head. I was feeling like poking umbrellas at people. It was just not a good thing. And so when I felt that wrong, and then I think for me what really sent me to the hospital was, here I had this great thing in front of me, and I knew that my life was about to change in the best way professionally. I still wanted to kill myself. And I thought, what a waste, because I'm feeling that come on, and I know myself. I'm going to do it. I've done it a couple of times, and I'm going to get better at it every time. And that's scary, to know that you're going to improve on suicide attempts. And knowing that I even felt that way, that was my call for help. And I actually made a call versus eating a bottle of pills, which was really helpful. And I called my mom and my cousin, and they said, good, finally.
Because it sounds from the way you're talking that you were the one that noticed the bad habits and the signs of it, and you were like, I'm not okay. Were there people around you that were suggesting you weren't okay? Was there?
No, I'm the best. I think depression and anorexia and all of the things that I've dealt with make you really good actor. They make you really good at putting on the best face. And I think that can be some of the worst. And after I wrote the book, I had so many people that were in my life in Chicago that wrote me, and or I've seen since, and they were like, I could have done something. I had no idea. I had no idea. That's what everybody says. I would have never imagined that you were in that place. I never knew that happened to you. I never knew you tried to kill yourself. I'm like, you wouldn't. It's not your fault.
You don't tweet about it.
No, it's not your fault. And I think that they could have known I was a little messy. I mean, my makeup artist, I wrote about that too. She knew that I was drinking in the middle of the day because I smelled like alcohol. She would regularly ask me. I would lie pretty consistently. I couldn't have been going to that many brunches between our shows. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So I think she could have known. I think that anybody watching might have. I gained a considerable amount of weight that last season during the worst of it. And I write about, I think that's a good, for me, was a great, something's wrong, is that I hadn't even put on pants. I had worn skirts at work, and then I would go home and put sweatpants on and didn't put jeans on. It was not to say that jeans are you're gonna be okay. Put on some jeans.
They're a little constricting. So I've been that way in my own depression, where I'm just like, if I don't put on pants, I don't know the difference.
You don't know the difference, and I let everything go, and I used alcohol as a Band-Aid. I respect so much that alcoholism is a real disease, and that's a completely different thing. That's not what I had. I had something where I was just using one bottle of wine a day at least to numb, or to help me forget more and more. And that was, or to just feel like I can make it through that next minute to get to the next place. So when I got this job offer, or I had the opportunity to even have the job offer, I was like, whoa, wake up, lady, put some pants on, probably go to the hospital. And that's what I did.
This is the breaking point. I don't want to ruin.
I don't want to ruin it. I want to do that next thing. I want to get to Good Morning America. Someone just told me that they want me on Good Morning America, and I'm going to go kill myself. That would be a real waste, and that's what sent me to the hospital. Did
you have friends that you were consistently lying to, and that was a little bit of a wake up, where you're like, here's somebody that I consider one of my favorite people, and I'm constantly telling her the opposite of how I feel?
Yes. And I think especially in the relationship that I was in the abusive relationship that I was in, my best friends who I've known since I was 12 or 13, that's when I switched schools a second time and had finally kind of settled in somewhere. And we've been friends since then. She knew, because she's the one that I was pretty open with for a long time. But I would call her at 2 in the morning, bawling, he did this, I'm in this place, I'm scared, I don't know what's gonna happen next. She got so sick of hearing that. She had just had a baby, and she set a limit and a boundary for me, which I very much needed in that friendship.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the opposite of what you asked, because I would say I was the most open with her, but I needed this, is that she said, I'm done.
Yeah.
If you're not going to make a better choice in your life and get away from this person, I can't do any more. I can't tell you one more time, leave. I can't tell you one more time to get out. And I needed that in that situation. When it came to my depression that came after that, I definitely lied to her. I lied to my parents. I lied to everybody. I lied to all my coworkers. I don't know anybody, including myself, that knew how bad it was, because I was lying to myself.
When you were lying to everybody, telling them that you're happy or things are going great or whatever, did that even start to kind of become a little bit of a moment where you're just like, I don't tell anybody what's actually happening in my life?
Oh yeah, I tell everybody a lot, and I think that's the thing, is I'm very open most of my life. I've been very open, but I'm not open about the important things. So I'm open about things that don't matter.
Like embarrassing. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the scariest person in the world to me is the person who you ask how their day was or their weekend was, and somehow you're talking about yourself again in like 10 seconds. Like they're the most frightening human beings, because I think they must be doing it in some sort of defensive I can't figure it out yet. But I've known them my whole life. I know a lot of them at work. I'm like, wait, but I just asked you a question.
Yeah.
You mind swear?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm not that person. But I found ways to tell the stories that would make them think I'm giving them a lot, but really I'm giving them nothing.
Yeah, you told them nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't tell them I was crying in the bathtub all weekend.
No, right. Whatever it was. Like, there's so many times in my life. But it all starts, and I've been writing chapters a lot on anorexia right now, and I realized what great training that was to be such a good liar. Anorexia is all based in lies. That is, you have your little control thing, and you're so pumped that you're doing what you're doing, and you're making great advances. That's how your mind thinks. You think that you're doing it right, especially if people don't know. And that first triumph, I remember the first meal I skipped, and the conflicted feeling of, this is a bad idea, but this is a great idea. And it's like the angel and the devil on the shoulders, and they're like coming together. And that's that feeling, and that ability to lie and tell stories to cover up the thing that you want to control takes you right through life.
I was going to ask you that. Do you believe that your anorexia was fully about having something to control in a chaotic childhood as opposed to looking a certain way? Because that's what I've read the most of, is that this is something that I not only control it, but I can see the results of it.
Yes.
Unlike how life is so uncontrollable and chaotic.
I was fortunate enough to have both of those things, I think. I think I really I had two parents who were very into health and fitness and obsessed with food, I'll say that. I mean, I think they both are, for different reasons, both decent reasons. My dad's father died early, and he went from eating like probably a normal human being, because they were from the Netherlands, to the doctor basically saying, your dad died because he ate too much cholesterol. And then my dad being like, whoa, I don't want to die like that. We're all eating healthy, and like a real obsession with that. And then him having an obsession, my mom having a food obsession, food with activity equals okay, and that's, I want a better body, and my dad having critical things on her body. So I had that in there, and then they divorced, and so it was like the perfect breeding ground for an eating disorder. And I chose anorexia, I think, and I say that I didn't choose anorexia. Anorexia was my disease because it was easy for me to control, and that was the time I didn't know which house we were going to be at. The judge set up the worst joint custody plan I've ever heard of, and you'd wake up not knowing which house you were at, and that is chaotic, on top of having a lot of other things happening with my parents and then getting remarried. So anorexia just was my thing. I had a thing. I had a thing where I got to control it, and then I got to see the results, and then I got to feel people saying, you're so skinny. And then it was funny, because as much as I cared what my dad thought, they can remember my dad and aunt, I was in maybe 10, when right before that year that it started, the fall of the school, that I remember skipping that first meal. And I remember they're saying, like, you're getting a little chubby, but like, you're growing. And there's nothing wrong with whatever, you're getting a little chubby. I probably was a little chubbier. But I remember thinking, I know that ice cream is the chubby, and maybe I'll not have ice cream. So it's like started with like very innocent, kind of probably health conscious choices that are probably not the worst thing, and then just dove into what I think got to almost hallucinogenic. I mean, I was to the point where a fat carrot would make me fat. So even the baby carrots that I had, I could only eat the skinny baby carrots like that. And
where you start to make up these weird rules of how, and which I
that's
think
how much it's not about food. Because baby carrot isn't about putting calories in your body, but it was about the delusion, and that's what anorexia always teeters on delusion, is what I've learned through my therapy, and the delusion of it. And one thing that I am so recovered from anorexia, but the bad pattern of food being associated with control, when a transition happens in my life, my immediate brain reaction is restrict.
Yeah.
It's just a thing, and then I have to, again, it's like me sitting down with my freaking journal, writing as a 38-year-old woman, you can eat. It's like a reminder, even though I know I can eat. I've been eating for years.
Yeah.
But it's like I have to that reprogramming. It has taken a long time.
I've read that you talked about how transitions are a big trigger for you, whether it's a positive, and that's the thing that nobody talks about, that like it doesn't have to be just negative transitions. It doesn't have to be like a breakup or, you know, you get kicked out of a house. It can be, I got a new job, or I'm gonna have a baby, or whatever it is. But could you talk a little bit about some of the positive things you do now, knowing that transitions are a trigger for you, that you kind of do almost like preventatively?
Therapy for me is the biggest thing. So that was the other thing that I felt. My husband, when I was pregnant with my second baby, he was so dead set on moving out of the city. And I didn't know all of it, because at first I was like, no, I'm not moving out of the city. I live here. This is where we live now. And I grew up on a small farm in Michigan, and now I live in Manhattan, and I'm a city person. And I think I've gone from, I've always been a city person, and it's like the opposite Zsa Zsa Gabor, like where I really belong on a farm. But no, this is me now. I'm very fancy. And he kept saying, where did that Michigan girl I married go? Where'd she go? And I'm like, no. And I was attaching so much to the city. I was attaching my success of getting this job, of being here, my success of learning myself and actually becoming an emotional, stable human being. I was attaching the joy that I've had since I moved here and since I made those decisions, the family that I was able to have. I was attaching all the best things that have ever happened in my life to an apartment, because I didn't even want to move apartment buildings. I just wanted to stay in the same place. And
we're dying here.
What's funny is I had been such a mover. When I was very unhappy, I moved every year. I was always looking for a place to make me happy, or some new thing to give me something new. I need a new space. I need to do something. And then once I found joy, and I found it in myself, this is what I didn't realize, is it wasn't the apartment. I was still attaching it to a space. And so I had to have a little breakup with the city, and we found the house, and I, along the way, we're really working with Dr. Wilson, like, why am I freaking out so bad? Why am I crying, thinking I'm Carrie Bradshaw? Like, I've only lived here 8 years. This is not, I'm not even a New Yorker yet.
Raised me as a baby.
So weird, calm down. And then we realized I was attaching all of those things to my happiness, and that apartment was it for me. That building was comfort, and I had never had that. Even my parents' homes were not comfortable because of many reasons, but they weren't home.
Well, 8 years is a long time when, like you said, everything is always constantly changing. So that is probably the longest time that you've had stability.
It's the longest I've ever lived anywhere, is what I realized. That was the other thing, is my mom's home. I shouldn't say that. My mom's home is a home, and it has become that. But it's become that over a long time. It wasn't at that time, because I was still going back and forth between my dad's and my mom's. And I was very uneasy in my life at that time, so it didn't feel like a grounded. Now she's created a much more of what I would say is a home.
Yeah, but you're an adult processing that, as opposed to the kid that was processing it.
And even that house, though, I moved in there when I was 12. I left at 18, so it was 6 years. So 8 years was the longest I'd ever lived anywhere, and that was a big thing for me. So we worked very hard. We made the transition, and the funniest part is my husband was because he lived half in Manhattan when he was a kid, and his parents were divorced same time, and half in this suburb where we actually live now. That's why he wanted to move there so bad. He's like, this is what we need, the kids, da-da-da. We get there. Just recently, he's like, I think we should move back to the city. I'm like, oh, no.
You did this to us.
I don't want to work that hard again on transitioning back. But I think that that's my lesson to myself, is identify that transition's coming, figure out where the base of it is, of their problem with it, or whatever might come up, and then go for it. At the same time, I still had to deal with a little bit of like anorexic thoughts coming back in. I got way too concerned about food in the house and like just got a little too controlling about how we were gonna have this in this place. Like it's down to like where the eggs go, like really silly things, but I know that that's, you know,
Yeah, as soon
that's
as
my
you start to
program.
feel chaos,
Yeah.
you want to control things.
Yeah.
Do you now have friends in your life now, whether it's because you've blatantly told them what has happened in your past, they've read your book, what have you? Do you have friends that check in on you? Do you have friends that that see patterns?
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like now that you have kind of thrown the doors wide open, that your friendships have evolved and become more supportive?
Oh, yeah, and I think I'm also much more open, but they are also much more open with me. So that's what happens with strangers all the time after
Yeah.
you write something like I wrote. But what was more impressive was my own friends who I thought I knew a lot about. Then they started coming out with stuff. I'm like, how did I never know this?
Yeah.
And it made me finally more curious and interested in other people's lives. Thank goodness, because I was so into myself. Obviously, a lot of these issues, you get spiraled right into yourself. It has turned me into what is, I believe, a more normal and adjusted human being that cares to hear what the other person's story is.
Yeah.
And I love that part of sharing my story, is that it actually helped me do this, have the contact and have the eye contact and learn. And I want to know about you, and I want to ask later, like where a lot of this stuff came from. I enjoy, not that I didn't before, but I was so in my own head, as we mostly are.
But I also think you don't understand where all this chaos is coming from. You feel like you're constantly in survival mode. So it's like, think of if you're in actual survival mode. Are you really worried about somebody having a
Yeah.
bad day when you're like, I don't know how to put food on the table?
And I've done a lot of media, and I get a lot of reaction from people calling my dress today a blanket, looking like pajamas, whatever. Like, people can be extremely mean on the facade. I've not had a lot of negative response to this, and I thought I would lose fans, and that was a big part of this book. So the book was also a first time in my life where I've cared so much about what other people think of me. Since I think I moved to the school that I ended up graduating from, I think I was campaigning for homecoming queen without even knowing it. Like, I needed people to like me. This was the first time saying, I guess I don't care if you like me, or
Yeah.
you like the story that I have, because this is it.
Yeah.
And that was huge. I still have a lot. I'm sure there are other things I haven't shared yet that people wouldn't like very much. But it's more, that is one of the first times where I've felt confident in myself, because I guess I don't care. And that's huge, if you
Yeah.
can say that.
Well, I wonder if it's not caring as much as it's accepting.
Yeah,
Because
but I
it-
also don't care. I don't care if someone says, well, she's had depression. I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you don't want to be my fan anymore?
But I
That's
do.
weird.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. That's a weird way to
Yeah,
dismiss
that's-
somebody, because
yeah, so I guess it's
it'd
not
be like if
care,
you
but
got
it's-
cancer and you're like, oh, I don't like people that have cancer.
But that's what I had to get over, and I think I did. I think that was me saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to tell you these terrible things. I cheated on people. I made bad decisions in my life. I am not Mrs. Sunshine Girl next door,
Yeah,
and I'm not the homecoming queen.
yeah.
So there. And that feels good, I think that's very freeing, to finally feel like a little bit of the mask is peeled off. There's still a lot there, and I think we all have it to a certain degree, and probably should. I don't think it should be all open.
Yeah, and I also think there's a difference. There's a difference of being open with fans or the public and being open with your husband, your
Yeah.
kids, your friends,
But
your
even
family.
with him, I've realized there's a kindness of even your most intimate relationships. He was saying the other day his favorite thing about when we were dating was that night we told each other everything. I'm like, well, we didn't tell her everything, because that would take way too long. And honestly, I don't remember everything. Like a lot
Yeah.
of it, I was just drunk. And so I
Yeah.
have no idea what I did or what I didn't do. And we were laughing about it. But he's like, well, I told you everything. And he's very different than me, where he's very much more, I would say, pure. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think. But he felt like he had given every detail, and that was so important to him. And I'm like, okay, but I've given you the things that matter. I've given you the things, and then we've created this strong foundation. And for him, it was a moment where he was able to tell me some of the mental health stuff that he had dealt with. He'd never told anybody. I'm like, you never said anything? People knew forever I had something wrong.
Yeah.
So it was like this realization. Even now, I've been married to him for 5 years, and I had no idea that talk was the thing. That was the thing, So I think you learn and you expose more and more through time, even in the most intimate relationships.
I loved you kind of comparing your chaos to storms. Like, I mean, I think there's something, because the truth of the matter is I think people have a lot of preconceived notions of what depression looks like.
Yeah.
This idea, like, there's definitely things that trigger your depression. Like, I've had breakups that triggered my depression. I've also woken up and
Yes.
just not understood why I can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And that also, sometimes it's 3 weeks, sometimes it's a year. When you compare it to storms, you kind of show the same way that you prepare it the best you can. We think it's going to be 6 feet of snow. It could be a little bit of slush like it was the other day, or it could
You
be
need
even
a better
worse.
forecaster.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone to help you out, I think.
Nobody's told me. There's a part of you that you prepare the best you can, but you
Yes.
actually don't really know what you're getting yourself into. Do you feel that both your career and then also the therapy and the tools that you've learned, you've started to almost create like a backpack of skills and tools that it doesn't matter what you throw at me, I'm ready?
Yep, I think so. I have woken up since checking into the hospital, and the one that's the scariest for me is the one that doesn't happen with the transition,
Yeah.
or with the one when I wake up and I'm just down, and I'm not nice, and I don't feel like being nice, and I don't feel like myself, and I just feel numb, and I don't care, and nothing matters. Having that, especially after you've had children and you feel like people are actually relying on you, that is that's scary to me. But what I've done now is exactly what you said. You create this support, this quilt around you of people, of things, of stuff that just can change your way. And the first thing I do is I say it to somebody. And to me, that's it. For me, that usually takes me up about 5% from wherever I was. And once I've said it, I'm like, okay, what's the next step? How do I get to this next place? I don't think it'll be like that forever. I'm sure I'll wake up with one of the darker times. I've been very fortunate to not have that dark of a time yet. But even within the last couple of weeks, I've said to my husband, something's wrong. And then I had to attack, what is it? What's going on? And it was the wake up time. There is no more transition. We haven't had anything big happen. And I had to go in kind of deep, and then it ended up being chemical, and I hadn't even really realized it, but, physical and stuff. And you don't give yourself credit for the things that you can't figure out right away. So I do that too, where it's like grace. I know that's so silly to say, but giving yourself that grace to figure out, have a little bit of time. And then if you can have somebody in your life that consistently reminds you, this is going to go away. The storm's going to pass.
Yeah.
It has to. That's how I liken it to the earth, because you have heat at the equator, you have cold at the poles, and that's why storms happen, because it has to be evened out. That's what the earth wants so badly. That's what we all want so badly. We all want to be evened out. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be more dynamic and farther away from the equator, and some people, you know what I'm saying, and you just happen to be that person who lays on that latitude, and then you learn ways to prepare for those storms. But I always too keep that in my head. It's like this most narcissistic thing. I keep my own quote in my head, but that the clouds can't last forever. It's not how the atmosphere works. It's not how life works. Like, sunshine is coming. It will.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna wake up one day, and I always cherish. That's what I'm better at too now, is having gratitude for that sun. When that sun is there, you're like, yes! I mean, people that live in San Diego aren't as good about this because they have it all the time. But when they do have a storm, I think it's where they are in latitude. It's where they happen to be geographically. It's thinking of that in your emotional health, that you may be the person who lives in the plains, who has more, severe weather.
Yeah.
Learning how to deal with that, telling other people in your life, I'm a kind of a tornadic person, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very good. And then you've identified it, and you have a shelter to go to. And that's what saves you, and that's what saves your life. So now I have that. I have the shelter, I have the community, I have the things that I need. I don't think I'm going to die from this, and that feels really good.
Yeah.
And I could not have said that 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I would have told you I was going to die from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
This was amazing.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.